No.
Have you read it? No.
It's not for me, it's for children.
Well, you probably enjoy it.
Imagine a boy in suburban London cracking jokes at the dinner table, while his parents, a lab technician and a transport engineer, chuckle between bites, unaware that their son would one day become a multi-millionaire entertainer, both loved and loathed in equal measure. That boy was David Edward Williams, born in 1971, who would later tweak his last name to Walliams as a nod to reinvention, and it suited him because reinvention became his superpower. As a kid, David was awkward and bookish, but he was also obsessed with comedy, drawn to British legends like John Cleese and Ronnie Barker. Though he was academically solid, it was during his time at the University of Bristol that something shifted. He wasn't just a fan anymore, he wanted it. Eager to sharpen his comedic instincts, David crossed institutional boundaries and joined the Footlights, Cambridge's legendary sketch group. Despite not being a Cambridge student, that group had birthed titans like Stephen Fry and Emma Thompson, and David wanted to be next. Through Footlights, he developed his voice, his timing, and most importantly, his confidence. That's where he met Matt Lucas, a young comic who shared his love for satire and absurdity, and together they became something rare, a duo that actually clicked. But even then, success wasn't immediate. David spent years playing minor roles on radio and stage, enduring rejection, and wondering whether a shy, slightly eccentric man could ever break into the big leagues. Yet he pressed on, refusing to give up. That decision paid off when he landed writing gigs that gave him the chance to perform his own material. One sketch led to another, and soon he was no longer playing to just a few people in a pub basement. He was captivating millions. The kid who once doubted his place in the entertainment world was suddenly rewriting its rules. When you're different, your path may look uncertain, but David's early life proves that being underestimated can be your biggest advantage. Don't chase the spotlight, build your own stage. What happens when two misfits find each other at the exact right moment in their careers? In the case of David Walliams and Matt Lucas, the result was Little Britain, a sketch comedy juggernaut that redefined early 2000s British television and divided public opinion with every outrageous episode. After honing their chemistry through small-time radio shows and character development in dingy clubs, the duo pitched something completely unorthodox, a show filled with grotesque parodies, bizarre catchphrases, and characters so exaggerated they bordered on satire and social commentary. The BBC took a risk, and Little Britain exploded into a cultural phenomenon. From Vicky Pollard's "Yeah but no, but yeah" to the absurdist antics of Daffyd, the only gay in the village, every character played by Walliams pushed the boundaries of identity, class, gender, and race. What made David stand out wasn't just his commitment. He became unrecognizable, melting into each character whether it was an aristocratic creep or a hyper-feminine everyman. The show won BAFTAs, broke viewership records, and got syndicated in Australia and America. But its comedic brilliance came at a cost. Even during its peak, critics raised concerns about racial caricatures, offensive portrayals of disabled characters, and the use of blackface in certain episodes. Fans saw bold satire, critics saw cruelty disguised as comedy, and yet Walliams stood by his work, often noting that pushing discomfort was the point. "We wanted to make people laugh and squirm a little too," he once said in an interview. The duo toured globally, and David, always flamboyant and mischievous, used live shows to amplify the absurdity. Hide the Sausage, one of the show's most infamous live sketches, would later haunt his legacy, but at the time it was all part of the magic. Walliams had gone from radio voice to visual shockwave, proving that humor, however polarizing, could dominate headlines and hearts alike. The key lesson: sometimes disruption is the only way to break through, but you better be ready for the consequences. What happens when a controversial comic trades in slapstick for storytelling and discovers he's also a literary powerhouse? That's exactly what David Walliams pulled off in 2008 when he shocked critics by releasing The Boy in the Dress, a charming children's novel about self-expression, bullying, and acceptance. People expected raunchy humor. What they got was tender prose and profound moral themes, wrapped in laugh-out-loud moments. Inspired by Roald Dahl, but with a modern emotional core, David's debut became a bestseller and marked the beginning of a second career that no one saw coming. He wasn't just cashing in on his fame, he was crafting stories with purpose. He followed it up with Mr. Stink, Gangsta Granny, and Billionaire Boy, each one filled with quirky characters, heartfelt lessons, and subtle commentary on modern family dynamics and societal norms. The books resonated globally, translated into dozens of languages, and adapted into films and stage plays. Children lined up to meet him at book signings, parents praised him for encouraging young readers, and teachers called him the modern-day doll, a title he humbly acknowledged but never claimed for himself. The irony. The same man once slammed for controversial sketches was now a national treasure in children's publishing. But writing wasn't just a pivot, it was therapy. In interviews, Walliams admitted that creating characters helped him process personal pain and connect with young minds in ways comedy couldn't. And he didn't shy away from tough topics either: poverty, illness, loneliness, all packaged in a way that kids could digest and even find uplifting. Through books, he gained something TV could never fully give him: enduring legacy. While shows fade, stories stay on shelves, in hearts, in bedtime routines. As he toured schools and libraries, David found a different kind of stage, one without cameras or laughter tracks, but filled with something just as powerful: hope. Reinvention isn't just survival, it's evolution. And David Walliams proved that sometimes your most lasting work comes after everyone's counted you out. It started as an edgy gag, a cheeky live show moment meant to shock and amuse. But Hide the Sausage, a sketch David Walliams performed during the Little Britain live tours, would eventually cast a shadow long after the laughter stopped. The premise was simple: David, in full character as Des K, a flamboyant former children's TV presenter with a twisted sense of humor, would invite volunteers, often celebrities, on stage and engage in increasingly risque antics under the guise of slapstick comedy. The sketch was chaotic, unscripted, and loaded with innuendo. On one occasion, David pulled down a volunteer's pants in front of a packed house. Another night, he playfully groped Jeremy Edwards during a comic relief gala, prompting an awkward laugh, followed by visible discomfort. Audiences were split. Some howled with glee at the outrageousness, others shifted uneasily in their seats. But that didn't stop Walliams. In 2009, he pulled musician Mark Ronson into the act during a charity gig, yanking at his clothes and joking afterward that he'd buy Ronson a new suit. The lines between performance and personal boundary became increasingly blurred. Matt Lucas later admitted in his memoir that while they often got laughs, some guests were clearly caught off guard and upset. It didn't help that footage of these moments lived on, endlessly replayed, dissected and reinterpreted in changing cultural climates. What seemed hilarious in the mid-2000s became cringeworthy in the #Me Too era, with some critics calling it harassment disguised as humor. Walliams, always the provocateur, claimed his intent was comedic and consensual, insisting that all participants knew what they were getting into. But the internet doesn't operate on intent, it works on impact, and the impact was damning. The sketch that once made him a live show legend became a case study in how comedy ages, and how badly it can. It's a cautionary tale: what you do for laughs today might be tomorrow's scandal. Respecting the crowd means knowing when the joke's gone too far. One of the most debated moments in David Walliams' live comedy career didn't come from a mainstream show, but from a BBC documentary filmed during Little Britain's Australian tour, an incident that in hindsight, many now see as the turning point from harmless boundary pushing to something more ethically questionable. In the 2007 special Little Britain Down Under, Walliams, again in his over-the-top Des K persona, invited several teenage boys, reportedly aged 16 to 18, to participate in the Hide the Sausage sketch during a live performance. Before the act began, Walliams made a point of confirming the boys' ages, and joked lightly when one admitted to being 16, keeping the tone comedic and in line with the show's anarchic spirit. Yet, what was intended as playful and self-aware humor quickly sparked outrage once the footage aired. The audience may have laughed, but viewers at home, and particularly critics, weren't amused. A complaint was even sent to Walliams himself, which he read aloud in the documentary, acknowledging that some people were deeply uncomfortable with the segment. But instead of apologizing or defending it outright, Walliams leaned into his signature mischief, noting that offending people was part of comedy's risk, and that the best laughs often come with a wince. The scandal was further fueled when human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell publicly voiced concern, arguing that sketches like this flirted with exploitation, even if technically legal. The lines were getting blurrier. Was it brave satire or poor judgment? At the time, the BBC stood by the program, but the buzz around it was a warning sign of changing times. What audiences accepted in 2007 would no longer fly a decade later. This sketch, once a footnote in a successful tour, became evidence in a growing case against Walliams' comedic ethics. Even fans began to wonder, was he truly a provocateur, with purpose, or just chasing laughs without thinking of the collateral damage? Either way, it showed that public tolerance was shifting, and fast. The comedy landscape had evolved, and Walliams would need to evolve with it, or get left behind in a storm of backlash. Halloween is supposed to be harmless fun, but in 2017, David Walliams learned just how quickly a costume can become a cultural lightning rod. That year, he posted a now infamous picture of himself dressed as North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, complete with prosthetics, makeup that mimicked Asian features, and a smug grin that seemed to double down on the offensiveness. Almost instantly, the backlash was swift and brutal. Social media exploded with accusations of racism, yellowface, and ignorance. At a time when global awareness around race and representation was reaching new levels, the costume felt tone-deaf at best and malicious at worst. Walliams, ever the Joker, tried to diffuse the storm with a mock text from Kim Jong-un, posted on Twitter, complete with fake praise for his children's book Bad Dad. But the damage had already been done. What might have been waved off as just a costume in the 2000s now stood as a cultural misfire, and it wasn't an isolated incident. In 2020, as the Black Lives Matter movement surged globally after George Floyd's murder, major streaming platforms like Netflix, BritBox, and BBC iPlayer pulled both Little Britain and Come Fly With Me from their catalogs. The reason? Multiple characters performed in blackface, brownface, and exaggerated portrayals of marginalized communities, including Walliams' now disgraced character Desiree DeVere, a black spa guest dripping in offensive stereotypes. The public didn't just react, they revolted. Petitions were filed, think pieces flooded media outlets, and social media turned into a courtroom. For many, this wasn't just about comedy, it was about accountability. Walliams and Matt Lucas eventually issued a joint apology, acknowledging that their choices had aged poorly and promising to do better. The apology was sincere, but many asked, why did it take so long? Why did it take global protests and mass outrage to admit what critics had pointed out for years? The cultural shift had caught up with Walliams, and the characters that once made him rich and famous now made him radioactive. Intent no longer excused execution. The lesson: what once got you laughs can get you cancelled, and ignorance is no longer a defense in comedy's new world. It wasn't a sketch, a costume, or a character this time. What damaged David Walliams in 2018 was simply being in the wrong room at the wrong time, or at least that's how he saw it. That year, he served as host at the President's Club Charitable Trust Auction, a high-profile black tie event in London, long attended by business elites, celebrities, and media personalities David had hosted before, even offering up perks like letting guests name characters in his upcoming books. But what had been framed as a glitzy fundraiser quickly unraveled into a scandal that rocked the British media. An undercover expose by the Financial Times revealed that female hostesses at the event were subjected to widespread sexual harassment, inappropriate touching, and degrading comments from the all-male guest list. Though Walliams was not directly implicated in the misconduct, his association with the event was enough to trigger a wave of backlash. Bookstores removed his titles from display, activists called him complicit by silence, and even casual fans wondered how he hadn't noticed what was unfolding around him. David quickly issued a statement claiming he had been unaware of any wrongdoing and had left the venue as soon as his duties were completed. But for many, that wasn't enough. One independent bookstore owner famously announced they would no longer carry his books, stating, even if he didn't know what was happening, he should have walked out the moment someone joked about spicing up your wife with plastic surgery. The line between guilt and complicity had blurred. David's defense, that he was merely the hired talent, not a participant, didn't resonate in a world increasingly intolerant of passive bystanders. The incident marked a turning point, not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. It wasn't about punchlines or costumes. It was about presence, silence, and responsibility. In an age where optics are everything, just standing in the wrong room can be a career risk. And for David Walliams, the room had become radioactive. Lesson: in the court of public opinion, silence can echo louder than words, and sometimes louder than guilt itself. If David Walliams thought his past controversies were behind him, everything changed in November 2022, when The Guardian released a leaked audio recording that torpedoed his role on Britain's Got Talent and shattered the public image he'd spent years rebuilding. The clip wasn't from a live show or an offhand comment, It came from behind the scenes during a filming break in January 2020, exposing Walliams making crude, demeaning remarks about contestants, including calling an elderly performer the C-word 3 times and making sexually inappropriate comments about a female participant. The remarks, which had been captured by the show's production equipment, had supposedly been logged and archived, yet somehow remained under wraps for nearly 3 years, until someone leaked them. The backlash was instant and brutal. Viewers who once saw him as the heart of the show, a warm, funny, compassionate judge who comforted crying kids and teased Simon Cowell, were now hearing him ridicule the very people he was meant to support. The contrast was jarring, like watching a hero unmasked. Walliams issued an apology, stating the remarks were part of a private conversation and never meant to be heard publicly. But the damage was done. While some fans argued, everyone says regrettable things off camera, others pointed out that a judge with power over contestants' futures should be held to a higher standard. ITV, under immense pressure, released a statement reinforcing their zero-tolerance policy for demeaning behavior, although they stopped short of naming Walliams directly. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings were held, and within weeks, David resigned, though insiders revealed he had been quietly pushed out. The fact that Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, and Alicia Dixon all declined to publicly comment only deepened the sense that his departure was more exile than exit. What made it worse was that this scandal wasn't about comedy, it was about character. There were no costumes or scripts to blame, no stage lights to hide behind, just David unfiltered, and a microphone he forgot was on. The lesson was clear. In today's world, private words can become public ruin, and when they do, even years later, the fallout can end everything in a matter of days. One moment he was the beloved wild card of Britain's Got Talent, the next he was gone without fanfare, apology tour or televised goodbye, and for fans, that silence spoke volumes. David Walliams' exit from the show in late 2022 was abrupt, but not unexpected following the leaked audio scandal, and while he claimed it was his decision to step down, insiders revealed a very different story. Panicked producers, emergency board meetings, and mounting pressure from ITV executives forced the show's most unpredictable judge to the brink. For a decade, Walliams had injected irreverence, empathy, and gleeful chaos into the series, clowning with Simon Cowell, comforting sobbing contestants, and single-handedly turning the golden buzzer into a viral sensation. His banter with fellow judges became as essential as the talent itself, his off-script pranks and heartwarming support, adding emotional layers the show sorely lacked. But once the scandal broke, that charm became a liability. ITV, eager to protect the show's family-friendly image, avoided naming names but released a stern statement about contestant dignity and respect, sending a not-so-subtle signal. Walliams, meanwhile, vanished from press briefings, declined interviews, and offered only a short written apology. And what made the moment even stranger was the silence from those closest to him. Simon Cowell, once considered a close friend, didn't release a statement. Amanda Holden and Alicia Dixon, his longtime co-judges, remained equally quiet. It was as if an invisible wall had gone up overnight, leaving David outside the gates. When Bruno Tonioli was named as his replacement, reactions were mixed. Some welcomed Bruno's flamboyance and musical flair, but others said the show had lost its soul. David wasn't just a judge, he was a lightning rod, a hard-on-sleeve performer who turned auditions into television gold. Without him, the show felt cleaner but colder. His departure left a void, not just in format but in spirit. In entertainment, replacements happen all the time, but true chemistry is irreplaceable. And David's sudden disappearance from a show he helped elevate proved that when controversy knocks, even stars can fall with no parachute, no applause, and no chance for one last bow. Just when it seemed David Walliams had disappeared quietly into disgrace, he did what few expected. He went on the offensive, launching a legal assault not to clear his name in public opinion, but to reclaim his rights in court. In September 2023, Walliams filed a lawsuit against Fremantle, the production company behind Britain's Got Talent, alleging they had violated UK data protection laws by leaking private transcripts from an off-camera conversation. His argument was both technical and philosophical. The remarks, though crude and regrettable, were recorded during a private break and never intended for broadcast or publication. The leak, he claimed, was not just a breach of trust, but a breach of legal privacy. In an age where off-mic moments can end careers, Walliams' case raised crucial questions about surveillance, consent, and the invisible microphones around us at all times. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the media industry, with producers, lawyers, and celebrities quietly wondering how much of their own behind-the-scenes behavior could be weaponized. But David wasn't just trying to make noise. He wanted accountability. Fremantle initially denied wrongdoing, but agreed to settle out of court just 2 months later in November 2023, reportedly paying Walliams a multi-million-pound sum to avoid a prolonged legal battle. It wasn't a public vindication, but it was a victory nonetheless. In some circles, it was seen as a strategic rebound, a way for David to regain control of the narrative without reliving the scandal detail by detail. And yet, he didn't do a press tour or claim moral high ground. He took the win and retreated, leaving speculation in his wake. Some critics argued that the settlement didn't undo the damage to his reputation, but others saw it as proof that even disgraced figures have rights, and that corporations aren't always the final judge. In an ironic twist, the man who once judged talent now stood judged by systems bigger than TV, legal frameworks, public trust, and digital ethics. Walliams' legal win didn't put him back on the panel, but it reminded the world that the fall of a public figure doesn't mean the end of the fight. Privacy matters, even for punchline kings. While tabloids speculated over comebacks, lawsuits, and career redemption, David Walliams quietly shifted his focus to something far more personal: his son, Alfred. After the high-profile collapse of his marriage to supermodel Laura Stone in 2015, David found himself navigating life as a single father, and it was a role that reshaped him more than any television show or best-selling book ever could. Their relationship had once been a fairy tale, he the cheeky TV star, she the statuesque runway icon, and their whirlwind romance, engagement, and 2010 wedding were splashed across magazine covers. But behind the glamour, there were growing differences. David longed for domestic stability and meaningful connection, while Laura thrived in a fast-paced world of international travel and high fashion. The cracks widened until their split became inevitable. After the divorce, Walliams made a conscious decision to prioritize Alfred, often turning down media opportunities to keep their life together private and intact. Paparazzi occasionally caught glimpses, bike rides through London parks, hand-in-hand walks to school, but beyond that, he shielded Alfred from the spotlight that had so often scorched his own life. Friends noted a calmer, more grounded David, someone who found joy not in applause but in bedtime stories and weekend hikes. He rarely spoke about parenting in interviews, but when he did, it was clear that Alfred wasn't just his son, he was his compass. And perhaps that's why David didn't rush back to TV after the scandal, despite calls for redemption arcs and new formats. He wasn't chasing noise anymore. He was rebuilding peace. Even the rumors in 2023 about him joining Raya, an exclusive celebrity dating app, were met with silence, no denials or confirmations, just a man quietly figuring out the next chapter on his own terms. Pictures on the alleged profile showed him smiling with his beloved dogs, Bert and Ernie, suggesting that companionship now came in simpler forms. While the media dissected his every career move, David was scripting a different kind of comeback, not to screens or stages, but to balance, to being present, to making sure Alfred knew that no matter what the world said, Dad was always there. Because in the end, the greatest legacy isn't fame, it's the love you give when the cameras are off. After his unceremonious departure from Britain's Got Talent, many assumed David Walliams would chase the typical redemption arc, rehab a public image, make a talk show appearance, maybe even do a tell-all documentary. But instead, he did the unthinkable for a man whose life had been lived in the center of media mayhem. He vanished. No interviews, no comeback tour, no attempts to claw back airtime. It was as if Walliams had gone underground, not out of defeat, but out of choice. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. He found relevance in a different arena altogether. Rather than rebuilding his TV persona, David poured himself back into writing, the one space where he had total control and no cameras watching. Sales of his children's books remained sky-high. Gangsta Granny, Mr. Stink, and The Boy in the Dress continued to enchant new generations of readers across the globe, proving that scandal had done little to dim his literary appeal. In 2023, he took things a step further by adapting Robo-Dog, one of his lesser-known titles, into a full-length animated feature. The film boasted a voice cast of A-list talent and was met with enthusiasm from kids and critics alike. It was a strategic move. Animation allowed him to remain in the entertainment industry without being physically visible. No red carpets, no interviews, just creative output on his terms. And that seemed to be the theme of his post-BGT life: quiet influence. He still appeared at charity events, especially those focused on children's welfare, and continued to support literacy programs in schools, but without the flash or the self-promotion. If anything, the scandal had refined him, stripping away the performative layers and leaving only the creator. He may have lost a chair on a judging panel, but he gained something harder to come by: peace. David Walliams didn't claw his way back into fame because he didn't need to. He already had a legacy inked in libraries, spoken aloud at bedtime, and engraved in childhood memories. His comeback wasn't on a screen, it was between the pages. Sometimes the quietest moves are the ones that last forever. From outrageous sketches, to children's books, courtroom battles to quiet redemption, David Walliams' story isn't just a cautionary tale about fame, it's a vivid reminder that the stage you build for yourself can also be the one that breaks you. He was once the laugh track of Britain, then became its controversy, and finally retreated into something far more enduring impact through story. While some see his fall from Britain's Got Talent as the end, others recognize it as a transformation. Not every comeback is loud. Not every legacy needs applause. And maybe the most surprising twist in David's story is that he doesn't seem to want one. So what's next for the man who made Britain laugh, cry, and argue all at once? Time will tell, but one thing is certain: David Walliams didn't fade. He recalibrated. If stories like this fascinate you, click the next video on your screen now, and dive deeper into the untold truths behind entertainment's most dramatic exits. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal, psychological, or professional advice. Please consult a qualified expert for specific guidance.